Update. Am I in the wrong for telling my ex-husband that our kids are justified in feeling like they don't have a father? Original post. I'm 33 and have two kids, 12 and 8. I divorced their dad when I discovered he was cheating on me with a mom from our younger son's school group. Despite that betrayal, I agreed to shared custody because I wanted my kids to grow up with their father in their lives. However, since the divorce, he's only been around when he's picking them up for visits. He often goes out with his stepchildren, but rarely includes our kids, claiming those outings are spur of the moment and can't always include them. Eventually, I stopped pushing, but I've always thought it was unfair that he keeps his distance from our children's lives. Recently, I decided to upgrade my older son's computer, and he asked if we could give his old one to his cousin, my brother's son. My brother has been a huge support for my kids. He's always available to take them to their school events when I can't, and often takes them out to the park or on trips when I'm busy. My ex, on the other hand, is rarely available for them. Anytime I ask him to help with an activity, he has an excuse. He's out of town or swamped with work. Ironically though, whenever his stepkids need something, he's there. Once he even argued with his stepkid's father at a school event, insisting he had a right to be there. When my ex found out I gave the computer to my nephew, he got upset. He complained that if I had money to spare on a gift like that, I should have forgiven 2 months of child support he'd missed, since his finances were tight with a new baby. He added that if I could give away a computer, I should have gifted it to either his kids or his stepkids, who shared just one computer among the 3 of them. I told him my finances were none of his business and that I owed nothing to his stepchildren. Then his wife jumped into the conversation, accusing me of spoiling my son by giving him a new computer and of being petty for letting my son bring it to their house, claiming it was just to show off in front of his step-siblings. I told her she had no right to speak to me that way or question my decisions. I added that I allow my kids to see their father so they can grow up with him in their lives, not so she can interfere with how I parent. My ex was offended, but I told him this whole situation could have been avoided if his wife hadn't inserted herself where she doesn't belong. After that, things seemed to calm down until last week. I went to pick up the kids, and my ex was visibly upset. He explained that he'd tried reading a bedtime story to our youngest. At home, he still likes to be read to before bed, usually by me, his brother or my brother. And when none of us are around, he listens to audiobooks. Apparently, my ex wanted to make an effort to connect, so he offered to read to him, but our son turned him down, saying he didn't need him for that because he could do it himself. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet, and it hit him hard. The next day, my ex offered to take our older son to basketball practice, but he replied that he'd be going with his dad. He quickly corrected himself and said, "Uncle." That made my ex even angrier. And when I came to pick up the kids, he confronted me about it. I told him that if our kids feel like they don't have a father, he has only himself to blame. He tried to shift the blame onto me, saying I was the one pushing him away from his role. I told him it's up to him to show up for his kids. It's not something I can do for him. I reminded him he was the one who broke our family and has chosen to be more involved with his stepkids than with his own children. I told him not to kid himself. The kids are growing up, and they're starting to see the reality of who he is as a father. If he keeps this up, he can't expect much from them in the future. After that exchange, his mom called me. While she's always been polite to me, I felt the need to say that I would have appreciated the same concern from her when she supported her son's affair, knowing her grandchildren were losing their father in the process. She hung up, and we haven't spoken since. My brother advised me that I had every right to express how I feel, but he suggested that maybe this discussion shouldn't have happened in front of the kids. Later, my ex texted me saying that if I weren't so difficult, he'd spend more time with them. I told him his duty as a father doesn't depend on whether I'm easy or not, and he knows I've never prevented him from seeing the kids. The truth is, when he has to choose, he prefers outings with his stepkids over his own children, and that's something only he can change. Now for the top comments before reading the updates. You can only do so much, OP. And don't let him off the hook for any child support. The fact that it's stretching his budget is a him problem, not a you problem. And I agree with your brother that that conversation should have not happened in front of the kids. But if I understand correctly, your ex chose the time and place, not giving you much choice in the matter. Not the a-hole. I love how if she had extra money, she should forgive child support. But him already knowing money was tight wasn't a reason to not have another kid. My ex stayed to listen as he searched for a story for 8-year-olds without a dad on his tablet. Pfft, your kid is ruthless. Good for him. Not the a-hole. 8-year-olds can be ruthless. They seriously don't hold back. They understand so much more at that age. First update. First, I want to thank all of you. I didn't expect to receive so much advice, and I never thought this app would be so useful. It's not very popular in my country. Now back to the topic. My ex sent me messages saying he wanted to resolve things, stop arguing and talk. I agreed. He came to my house and we didn't beat around the bush. We went straight to the point. He asked if I really thought he was a bad father. I replied that, looking back, I never would have chosen him to be the father of my children. He said it wasn't easy for him, and I answered that it wasn't easy for me either, because I've been taking on both his role and mine. He told me he couldn't leave his stepchildren without a father because he had already broken their family. I replied that in doing so, he left his own children without a father. He started crying and told me it was my fault, saying that when the infidelity happened, I refused to forgive him or go to couples therapy. I kept telling him things that, I'll admit, were unkind, but none of them were lies. He asked me if I felt sorry for him given his current state, and I said no. He told me he didn't think I could be so cruel. I replied that when I changed jobs, pulled my kids out of school 2 months before the term ended, moved houses, and watched him disappoint our kids over and over again, any empathy I might have felt had turned into apathy. He left after that. His mother called me as saying she knew what I had told her son. She said he hadn't stopped crying and that she didn't understand how I could carry so much hatred and hurt him like that. She told me I should just get over it. I answered, with all due respect, what I said wasn't out of hatred but truth. If your son is crying, it's because he's finally facing the consequences of his actions. Maybe instead of worrying about how he feels now, you should have taught him how to take responsibility and treat people with respect. She said I didn't know what it was like to feel a mother's love and see a child suffer. I replied that I do understand because I have 2 children who cry over a living father. 2 children who see their dad being a father to other kids when he doesn't have time to be a father to them. She said he was sorry, and I told her not to put words in his mouth and to stop calling me about anything related to her son. I hung up. I wanted to cry so badly, but I'm a damned mother, and I don't have time for that. I want my kids to feel safe, loved, and strong enough to not need anyone, not even me, to be themselves. Last Thursday, I took my kids to their cousin's birthday party hosted by my ex-sister-in-law. I still have a good relationship with her. She was the one who told me about the infidelity and that her mother was encouraging it. My ex showed up alone and irritated. My kids kept their distance from him. They kissed his hand but then ignored him completely. My ex-mother-in-law told the kids they should show more respect to their father. My eldest replied that he doesn't show respect for me since he and his partner talk badly about me. I scolded my son, not for what he said but for how he addressed his grandmother. I told him it was wrong to eavesdrop on private conversations and repeat them. Then I asked him to gather his things because we were leaving. My ex-mother-in-law asked me not to leave, saying the kids were having fun and we could resolve this as adults. She asked my ex what he had said, and he claimed not to remember. I told her I didn't care. She said we should be good parents. I replied that to be good parents, you need to be good people first. My ex was getting agitated. My ex-mother-in-law asked why we couldn't have a civilized co-parenting relationship. I told her everything I've mentioned here, about his free will to see the kids, and how the second custody agreement isn't working since he only sees them some weekends. My ex didn't want to discuss it, saying he had too many kids at home. My ex-mother-in-law told him the only kids who should feel comfortable are his, and the comfort of the others should be provided by their biological father. My ex wanted to end the conversation because his mother was scolding him for being a careless father. He also said it was my fault. I asked him to clarify how it was my fault. You can see the kids whenever you want. What more do you want? He started yelling, claiming I was only being petty because I didn't really need the money since I earned more than him and had fewer kids to feed. I told him I wouldn't continue the conversation and that I'd show him what being uncivilized looks like by filing for the overdue child support payments. His mother asked what I meant by overdue payments. I explained that he was 3 months behind. She was furious, slapped him, and demanded to know what he had done with the money for his children. He answered, I couldn't let JR miss out on attending the same school as my son. I didn't want him to feel inferior. My ex-mother-in-law said she couldn't believe it, and they started arguing. I left. For context, my youngest son attends a private school, and my ex pays for his stepson to attend the same school. Yesterday, my ex-mother-in-law came over and said she would pay the overdue fees. She brought the money in cash. I knew my ex would be furious. Here's some context. My ex-mother-in-law doesn't work, doesn't own anything herself, and lives with my ex-sister-in-law. However, she does have significant savings from her inheritance. If she pays the tuition, my ex knows there won't be much left for him when she passes, even though she's still healthy. He's been asking her for years to invest some of that money in his business ideas, but she's always refused. My ex's retaliation was not picking up the kids this weekend. Yesterday, my ex-sister-in-law called me. She doesn't know all the details yet, but apparently my ex's 15-year-old stepson punched him in the mouth. She said she'll let me know exactly what happened once she finds out. And before anyone asks, the new custody agreement will likely take a year to finalize. The court says the overdue payments are the priority, and the rest can wait. We have more urgent cases. At least his mama finally got some sense her son is a POS. He obviously fed her a line of BS when she was defending him. He's her baby boy. He would never do no wrong, etc., etc. I'm glad he got exposed. When the evil mother-in-law turns on her spoiled child, you know he was 100% wrong. It's not even a question of perspective anymore. The chef's kiss was being punched by the stepson he prioritized his own kids over. Bet he feels utterly ridiculous now. He was his mom's affair partner. No matter what he does, those kids will always hate his guts. Second update. As I mentioned earlier, my ex's stepson had an altercation with him because my ex refused to let him go out. Now I have more details. My ex's stepson had plans to go bowling with some friends. His biological father had already given him permission and money for the outing. However, when he told his mother, she said he couldn't go because they needed him to stay home and watch his younger siblings. My ex and his wife had planned an outing and needed someone to stay with the kids. This led to an argument. The boy raised his voice to his mother and my ex stepped in to demand that he respect her. The boy replied that he wasn't his father. Trying to maintain authority, my ex told him that as long as he lived under his roof, he had to follow his rules. The boy ignored him and turned away. My ex followed him and touched his shoulder to get his attention. At that moment, the boy turned around, punched him, and shouted that he wasn't his father and could never compare to him. The mother scolded him for his behavior, but the boy, still angry, shouted back that he hated her. This version was shared by my ex and his wife with my ex-mother-in-law. My sister-in-law later related to me. They went to see my ex-mother-in-law to try to gain her sympathy and convince her to take care of the kids, the 2 stepchildren and the baby, so they could go out. However, my ex-mother-in-law told them she would not take care of the children. When I spoke to my ex, he mentioned he was dealing with family issues and claimed that the boy's biological father was turning the boy against him. He didn't give me many details and omitted most of what my sister-in-law had shared. He simply informed me that, due to the situation, he wouldn't be able to pick up our children this weekend. The 15-year-old boy is now staying with his biological father. As for what I mentioned earlier, my ex was 2 months behind on child support. And that same week, he was supposed to make another payment. He didn't, leaving him 3 months behind. In the end, his mother was the one who covered the overdue amount. Regarding the child who attends the same school as my son, it's not the 15-year-old involved in the altercation. It's the younger stepbrother who is 8 years old, the same age as my son. I decided to enroll my son in that school when the affair became public. At the time, I was working as a kindergarten teacher at the same school and the boy had been one of my students. We all knew each other, and to protect my children from rumors, I transferred them to a private school. This happened 2 months before the school year ended. Thanks to the circumstances and the support of some kind people, we managed to get them admitted. Wow, dude's so thick he can't see that the only person turning the kids against him is himself and his actions. Did he think that all the children and the marriages he destroyed would be understanding or something? Dude sounds like a narcissistic tool who will still be blaming you for turning the kids against him when they go no contact with him after they turn 18. Wait, so a fair partner's son was in your kindergarten class, and you transferred your son to a different school to get away from them, and they moved a fair partner's son to that school too? Seems rather crappy of them. But they are siblings now. They got to get along. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my girlfriend to stop telling me how to spend the money I won? I live in the UK and I recently won a life-changing amount of money. By this, I mean enough to quit my job and never work again. I live with my girlfriend and told her about the win. She was excited about the fact I'd won, and we started talking about what to do with it. We live in quite a deprived part of the UK, so my girlfriend immediately started talking about moving to a city and living somewhere nicer. I said no to this, as family and friends are nearby and my parents are both quite ill, so I don't want to move far away and have to travel far to see them. She said we could look at cities that aren't too far, but I again refused and just said we'll look at a nice house in a better part of the town we live in. She said she doesn't want to continue living here if we have this much money. I told her it's me who has won the money, so she doesn't get to tell me how to spend it. She just said she wants to move away, but I reiterated that it's my winnings, not hers, and the final decision is mine. She said I wasn't being fair by not considering it, but I told her she was being unreasonable for expecting to dictate how I spend the money. She said we're a couple and should be making the decisions together, but I told her that some things aren't up for discussion and that I'm not moving away. She just called me unreasonable and said I should be considering her opinion on it. Am I the a-hole for telling my girlfriend to stop telling me how to spend the money I won? Now for the comments. Do not get married to this woman without getting thorough legal advice on how to protect your assets. And I'd add, don't have a kid with her either. Don't leave debit or credit cards around. Change all passwords and bank statements. Don't tell anyone else about this, and laugh and say it was only $10,000 when people start asking questions. Always lie and say you have less. Recently won a life-changing amount of money. Pretty crazy how often this seems to happen on here. Some people really underestimate what is required to be able to quit and never work again. Financial literacy is quite low. When people win such massive amounts, they get the itch to spend. Forget the money for a moment. There's an existing incompatibility issue with not wanting to live in the same type of area. If that can't be solved, nothing else about this relationship, including how to spend the money, matters.